Welcome to Larry's Library. Got a special one for you this week. This is a response video to a challenge that was thrown down to me from Taylor Talks Comics. And he did his video for his My Favorite Most Important Comics Ever. And that was a challenge he was responding to from Jess Bragg over on OmniDog's Vault, where he presented his most important comics ever. So in turn, Taylor challenged me. So Taylor Talks Comics' very thoughtful video on this is quite a tough act to follow, but I'm going to give it my best. I started reading comic books and really started collecting them shortly thereafter. I'm going to say around 1977. And I was about 9 years old at that time. So I have seen a lot of things come and go, that's for sure. But like a lot of things, I think for most people, I think the movies and the music and the TV and certainly the comic books that they discovered when they were growing up, they often stay with them throughout their entire life. And it's hard to shake it. And I'm no different in that. I mean, I've certainly picked up a lot of books and I'm reading all kinds of new things every day. But some of the stuff I discovered back when I was 10, 11, 12, 13 years old still just stays with me forever. And I just can't shake them. And it even becomes a sort of a barometer that I put everything up to. Well, is it as good as that? Or is it as good as this? And invariably, I'm referring to something usually from 1980 or 1981. But I can't help it. You know, it's I guess the power of nostalgia really is a huge thing. But when I go back and reread some of these works, and I look at some of that art, it still holds up. Now, not all of it does, but certainly the five I'm going to name here really holds up. I think that Taylor really outlined what the parameters are really well in his video, and I will link it down below. So I encourage you to go watch that. Go watch that one too. It's really good. And I'll link up Jess's video on OmniDog's Vault as well. So you want to watch those too if you get a chance, because it's good stuff. And it may point out some things that you've never read or you've never considered reading before. Maybe some things you never heard of. Now, I don't know that I've got any in here that you've never heard of, especially if you've been watching this channel regularly. But if you're not and you're new to the channel, well, of course, welcome. And you're going to see a lot of the things that I rant on and on about quite frequently as the comics that I love. First off, the rules. I'll go ahead and outline those. Not so much rules, but parameters. These are not in any kind of order. They're just my top five. And these aren't I'm not saying these books are the most important comics of all time, or even the best comics in any category. These are simply five books that are most important to me, okay, in my collection. And I'm going to say ever. So I'm going to take the same title they did for their videos. This is my five most important comics ever. And so, of course, these books are still in my collection. Now, they may have changed formats, but they're still in there in some way. So the first one I'm going to talk about is one that I am so happy that it's just about to come out in omnibus format. It's not here yet, but it's coming. And that is Marvel's Godzilla run. Now, this series started in the late 70s. It didn't last very long. It went for 24 issues, so it's going to fit in one nice, beautiful omnibus. And I, of course, still have all the singles. Now, I say still, but these aren't the actual issues I had from my childhood. Because, like an idiot, like a lot of people, you know, that started reading and collecting comic books, you know, when they were kids, at a certain point, a lot of us got the idea in their head that they had to go above these things now because now they're adults and they shouldn't be collecting comic books. I hope that didn't happen to you, but it did happen to me. I sadly have to report. And so I sold all of my original comic book collection like an idiot. So now I have since reobtained most of the books that were in my collection, in my original collection, and many, many more that I only dreamed of owning before, and I just never could manage to obtain a lot of these books. Like Godzilla. I discovered Godzilla when it was new on the stands, but it wasn't as easy to collect comics back then. There was no internet to order from, you know. And now eventually my local comic shop did develop a pull system a folder. They would put your stuff in, and you'd come in and get them each week or whatever. And I certainly took advantage of that. But at first, they didn't even offer that. There was no pull list. You just had to get there and get the thing before it sold out. And so, you know, I missed several issues of Godzilla as it was coming out. And it was difficult for me to obtain the entire run back then. And I actually failed. I never managed to get them all. You know, I had quite a few of them, but I never got all of them. But when I got back into comics in a big way and started collecting again, I did get all of the Godzilla issues. Getting issue 1 in good shape was rough. That's a little bit of a pricey book, but I do have them all. And I am going to double dip and get that omnibus as well, because I love that old Herb Trimpe artwork. Now, this series is not a grim and gritty Godzilla like you've seen depicted in some of the incarnations of the last decade or so. I like those too, but this is not that. It's kind of a wacky 70s Marvel, you know. It's a little silly at times, a little goofy, but it is set firmly in the Marvel Universe. So you see Godzilla taking on the likes of S.H.I.E.L.D. You see Dum Dum Dugan is pursuing him throughout this. He eventually clashes with the Fantastic Four and the Avengers. It's awesome. It's just, I can't stop smiling when I think about how great the Marvel Godzilla was, because, you know, I think the reason I gravitated toward these sort of, as Taylor Talks Comics put it, these sort of niche, less popular runs from the original Marvel comic books, was because I could start it with number 1. You know, when I first started reading Godzilla, it was on like issue 6 or 7. I'm like, well, wow, there's only 6. I'm only missing the first 6 here. You know, so it was that sort of thing. It was a very attractive option where I could start at the beginning of something. You know, because, you know, Avengers was on issue, you know, 174 or something like that, and Fantastic Four was similar high number, you know? And you couldn't just go get trade paperbacks to fill yourself in or read it online. You know, in many cases there were no reprint collections of these books, not for a long time, and eventually that started happening. Reading this Godzilla comic and seeing him clash with heroes from the greater Marvel Universe, in some ways was kind of an introduction for me to these other heroes whom I didn't know a lot about. I'd seen a little bit here and there, read a few issues here and there, but I didn't really know a lot about, you know, the Avengers or the Fantastic Four. But that made me go pursue these, and it was like a gateway drug, you might say. It got me into the greater Marvel Universe, and I just love it. The Marvel Universe of the late 70s to the early 80s and maybe into the mid 80s, definitely, yeah, mid 80s, is sort of what I consider my universe. It's where I spent so many years of my life, and I still find myself visiting. So yeah, so it's near and dear to me, and I love the Godzilla run. I think it's fantastic. It's goofy at times, sure. It's a little silly, but it has some great Herb Trimpe artwork. Doug Minch wrote the whole thing, and if you're curious about it and you like some of the artwork and stuff you've seen from it, definitely pick up that omnibus. It's coming real soon. Another one I love, and I've talked about a lot, and it's certainly one of my personally most important books in my collection, and that is Rom Space Knight. Another late 70s, early 80s, early 80s Marvel property. And it was based on a toy, but not really. I mean, the name was from a toy, and I guess the look was a little bit from a toy, but Bill Mantlo, he basically created it from whole cloth. I mean, the concept of Rom Space Knight, the title, was pretty much all that was given to you from the toys. And the toy, I gotta say, it was really goofy looking. I never owned a Rom toy, and they were really sad looking toys. They were about that tall. They were big toys, but just really goofy. The comic book, not goofy at all. Okay, yeah, the Rom in the comic book, well, he's pretty badass. If I could use a little bit of a cliched term, the Rom in the comic books is awesome. And Bill Mantlo weaves this story of sorcerous, vile creatures and space knights and cosmic powers and clashes of different alien races. I mean, I could go on and on about Rom. And in fact, I did go on and on about Rom in a video just about that character. So if you haven't seen my Rom collection tour video, check that out. I'll link it above. because, yeah, I show every single cover of all, I think it's 72 issues, 75, maybe 75, plus the 4 annuals and a couple other appearances that he had, or that some of the characters from ROM appeared in. But yeah, ROM I collected from issue 1. Me and my buddies both did, and we loved it. And yeah, it's just near and dear to me. I can't think of comic books without thinking of these 5 comics. You know, it means that much to me. And I do have the first 2 omnis of ROM. Glad to get that. I have every single issue of the original books. And there's going to be one more omni to hold all 3 volumes. Or to hold all the material. Takes 3 volumes to fit them in. And yeah, so I'll be getting volume 3. And I'm not selling my singles either. I'm keeping them all. Another book, another series, another run from my childhood that I continued reading throughout most of my life, and still occasionally reread some of that, is Uncanny X-Men. Now, for me, Uncanny X-Men, my X-Men, are Storm and Wolverine and Kitty Pryde and Cyclops and Colossus and who else? Nightcrawler. And that is about it. Those are my main ones. I like Angel, Iceman, the Beast. Yeah, that's my team right there. Hopefully I didn't leave any out. But anyway, in my era is my favorite era. And the most important stuff in my collection, in many ways, is the Uncanny X-Men era from the Chris Claremont, John Byrne issues, all the way up through when Dave Cockrum returned briefly after John Byrne left and went over to the Fantastic Four. Dave Cockrum came in, and then eventually it became Paul Smith, and there was a couple other artists in between there. Brent Anderson did a fantastic issue with Man-Thing that I will never forget. So yeah, I would say, you know, from the time Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Terry Austin were the 3. In fact, I'm going to make an analogy. Taylor Talks Comics did several music analogies a little bit in his video, and I'm going to do it here. To me, in many ways, I think that Chris Claremont, John Byrne, and Terry Austin are the Beatles of comic books. Okay, if you're a Beatles fan, and I am, if you love the music of the Beatles, and you put them in this great place of honor in pop music and rock music, in that same way, I put Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Terry Austin. They are that big in my mind, and specifically for Uncanny X-Men. So that's what I'm going to say. And so yeah, the Claremont, John Byrne, Terry Austin era, all the way through probably to around issue 163, I think, somewhere around in there. I vividly remember the Dracula issue, which I believe Bill Sienkiewicz did the cover. I think he might did the interiors on that one. That was fantastic. And I read X-Men Uncanny past that point. But the stuff that really gets me and that I love the most and I think of as just iconic and forever burned into my mind as the X-Men is the Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Terry Austin, on through about maybe 30 issues past that point, up to the point where Paul Smith takes over for art. I thought it was still really great then. And then when John Romita Jr. came in, I think the book declined a little bit for me. I still liked it a lot, and I continued to collect and read it, but that wasn't the era for me. It was the era right before that. So that is definitely one of my 5 most important books, most important comics in my collection ever. Now, I did not keep all of my singles of Uncanny X-Men. I kind of regret selling some of those now, to tell you the truth, but I did keep a sampling, and I'll show you what I did keep in some B-roll here from that era. But of course, I have the Uncanny X-Men Omnis, and my era, my X-Men, are collected in volumes 1, 2, and 3. I think pretty much gets that beautiful, perfect era in my mind. If you want to know, it's the first 3. Get those for sure. And really the best stuff, in my opinion, is in Volume 2 and in Volume 3. Another series I collected from issue 1 onward is the first run of Moon Knight. I'm talking the Doug Minch, Bill Sienkiewicz issues. Unfortunately, I did not keep all of my singles of Moon Knight. I had all of those. And it's another thing that I ended up selling. And the reason I did that is just to control the size of the collection and to free up funds so that I could buy omnis, because I do prefer the hardcover formats, so that's something I did. And sometimes I regret it and sometimes I don't, but I did keep a sampling of awesome singles from that run. I didn't sell everything. I'll show some of that in some B-roll of what I did keep from that era. All of that iconic, perfect run is collected in 2 omnibuses. I believe it's called Moon Knight by Doug Manchin, Bill Sienkiewicz, Volume 1 and Volume 2. That's probably the title. I don't have it in front of me, but it's on my shelf in a place of honor, And yeah, I just love this so much. And this one was a little bit of a departure for me because this was before I probably got into Uncanny X-Men really heavy, close to around the same time, but I hadn't quite got all the way into X-Men yet. And I started reading this Moon Knight stuff, and it kind of introduced me as a kid to the idea that comics could go beyond just sort of silly slugfests, and big explosions, that it could be, really dark and gritty and kind of adult, And that comic did explore some of those themes quite beautifully in some cases. There's even an issue where it touches on child abuse, and it does it in a very thoughtful way. And that issue really holds up even today, I think. And it's a very important book. I'll put the cover up here if you haven't seen that one. Great, great stuff. One of the best single issues ever written, I think, is that issue of Moon Knight. And yeah, this whole run is fantastic. Bill Sienkiewicz started out sort of aping Neil Adams a little bit, which is not a bad thing to ape, in my opinion, as far as art. But he develops a style all his own, and he goes in all kinds of crazy directions. And you're drug along with him. And the Moon Knight character, of course, is well known to have a lot of mental problems. And that fits really well with Bill Sienkiewicz's art here. It's skewed in some weird ways, but some of it's very horrifying. There's some horror issues of Moon Knight in this run, for sure. And yeah, it's great. It is dark and gritty and wonderful. Some people write Moon Knight off as just, oh, this is Marvel's Batman. So much more than that. That's very surface level analysis to say that. But it goes way beyond just aping Moon Knight or aping Neil Adams. This is a great, great run. If you haven't read the Doug Mitch, Bill Sienkiewicz Moon Knight, you are missing out. So yeah, check those out. Oh, by the way, I should stop here before I give my last one, because I've named 4 so far. This was extremely difficult to whittle down to 5, I got to tell you. I had to cut some stuff that's near and dear to me to fit only 5 in this list, because I like a lot of comic books, a lot of Marvel, and a lot of non-Marvel, but mostly Marvel. I mean, come on, I'm a Marvel guy. I mean, I think that's pretty well known. But yeah, this was very difficult. And finally, the last one I'm going to mention here, we can finally step out of the late 70s, early 80s. And I'm talking about Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley's phenomenal, I think they went 111 issues straight on Ultimate Spider-Man. And I was there for it. I was buying these month to month, and I was reading them with my family, with my daughter, Kristen, the Comic Slayer, and my wife. We were all reading that together. And that's part of the reason that this one holds a really special place in my heart, because when I think back to those issues, I think about that we read these all together. It wasn't just me experiencing this and then, blabbing my mouth off to people about it, and going on and on. It was, we were reading it together and we were reacting to it together as these books came out. And of course, I don't have all of my singles from this. I did keep a sampling of singles, to represent that awesome era. But I have the omnibus, Volume 1. I'm probably going to pick up Volume 2 at some point. I never did grab it. You can't buy everything. But Volume 1 for me is the one. I mean, really it is. Really, the entire first 110 issues are awesome. But what's contained in that first volume, the first 30 or 40 issues or so, are what I really think of when I think of that time that I was reading these with my wife and daughter, So, yeah, Ultimate Spider-Man is, this is not a hot take. Everybody loves this run, even people who typically don't care for Brian Michael Bendis. And I am a Bendis fan. I'm an unabashed Brian Michael Bendis fan. But there are some who aren't quite fans of him, and they still love Ultimate Spider-Man because it was great. He just ticked all the boxes, and the Mark Bagley art just made it even better. Yeah, it's a great, great run. If you haven't read it, what are you waiting for? Hop in there, grab that omnibus, just buy it and read it. I mean, it's fantastic. So these books are super important to me, and I hope they're important to you, or I hope you maybe are going to check them out if you haven't already. And I have reviewed several of these things or done tours of them in the past, and I'll try to link them all up here if I can fit them in. So if you want to know more about it, want to delve a little deeper before you buy maybe, check out my videos on those. And again, yeah, check out Taylor Talks Comics, his video. I'll link it below, and OmniDog's video. Now, as is tradition, I'm going to challenge someone else to do this whole thing, to do this same thing and name their 5 most important comics ever in their collection. I would challenge my daughter, Kristen, the Comic Slayer, to make a video with her 5 most important books ever. But she's a little busy at the moment. She's a little busy growing a human. That's right. She's about to have a baby. So, and she's kind of taking a break from YouTube for a while. So I'm not going to put this on her right now, but I reserve the right to challenge her later when she has more time and more energy to devote to it. I'd like to know what her 5 most important comics are in her collection ever. But for now, though, because she is on a little YouTube hiatus, I'm going to challenge David, the Garage Geek. So now it's on you, David. If you have time, no pressure, but don't leave me hanging. Make a video of your 5 most important comics ever that are in your collection now and show them to us. No hurry, but that's my challenge, is to David, the Garage Geek. Hope you liked this. Hope you enjoyed seeing my favorites and my most important books, rather. Hope you like checking those out. List yours below if you want in the comments, and I'll check those out. And I thank you for watching. Give me a thumbs up if you love this, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.